text me today and say, hey, it's open now, right? So life is getting back to normal here. I don't agree with the way the government handled the lockdown, but what can you do, right? As far as racism is concerned, I think I've dealt with more racism in the 80s and 90s than I have now. I think racism now is probably more of a undercover type thing. It happens. It happens in policy, right? And it's very sneaky. It's very um, it's very what's the name of the socialist group? I'm trying to recall the name of the socialist group that Orwell was a part of. But Orwell was a part of a socialist organization, and they their logo was a wolf in sheep's clothing. So you find that a lot of the policies pushed by Democrats pose as something that's supposed to be good, but they're actually detrimental to the black community. So it's not really the people that, call you the N-word and say they hate you that are the problem. It's really the people that pose as friends that are the problem. When we look at LBJ's New Deal, before the New Deal, there was a higher rate of black couples staying together. And then afterwards, you see that start to decrease. It seems everywhere that the white liberal sticks their nose and tries to help, they make things worse. And they don't help in a way where we can achieve and grow. For example, I believe that the best way for any society or any nation or any group of people is to rise is to first have an economic base, right? So no matter what civilization we look at, we go back to Greece or Rome, if you're wholly dependent upon another nation for your grain and water and so on and so forth, at any given moment, they can shut that off and they can control you. And now you have to go to war to get your life back in order. And that's what we have in the black community, where we don't have a strong internal economy. A lot of other cultures in America have a strong internal economy. They can almost survive without the interference of government or any other group of people. And black people just lack that. So the other thing you have to understand is that a lot of the racism that we see on the internet does not reflect what we see on the streets. Locally, you might have incidents of racism pop up here and there, but for the most part, white people are cordial and black people are cordial, and we, for the most part, we get along. It's not like this thing that you see in the media and on social media where there's this, raging race war. It's just not that at all.
Yeah, because the impression we have here is that America is burning, and everybody's on riots and tension on the streets. So that's why I really wanted to hear someone there on the source to give us the reality and to give us a perspective on what's really happening.
Yeah,
And
the socialist group is called the
yeah,
Fabian Socialists. For people
okay.
that want to look that up, that's the Fabian Socialists. Yeah, you were
Hmm.
saying, you wanted to get a peek into what's really happening in America.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we hear a lot about the riots and the tensions happening in US, and there is an idea that everybody's on the streets and cities are burning, and that's why I I I always doubt that image we see on TV, and I wanted to hear a person who lives there, who's living that and is going through that, especially a black guy, to give us the reality and on what's really happening. So we have a comment and a question here from Bruna. So she's asking about these protests uh, during the COVID times. So one time there is a message saying don't go out and don't gather, and these protests are allowed. What? How do you see this?
Yeah, it's a contradiction, right?
Yeah, man.
It doesn't make sense at all. A month ago they said, no large groups together, and then now it's like, well, no large groups unless you're protesting, right?
Yeah.
But I think that that goes to show you that. So in America, they've created this divide where there's a left and there's a right. And the left would probably vote for Joe Biden and the right would vote for Donald Trump. And it's the left that has more cultural control in America. The right really doesn't have much cultural control in America. It's mostly the left. The left owns uh, the banks. The left owns the educational institutions. The left wholly owns the media. So we live in a leftist dominated culture. So if America's going to crap, you know who to blame, right?
Yeah.
If you see that a contradiction in COVID, where 1 minute, for example, when they first told us that we had to, stay indoors and social distance and all that, after a while, the right got restless and carried out protests, and we're protesting, locally in many different spots. And the left media villainized them and said, "This is bad. You guys are bad. You're not social distancing." But when it was time for the left to protest, all of a sudden, it didn't matter, right? It's like, oh
Yeah,
well,
prepare.
yeah, yeah. So we have to understand that this fake dynamic they created, this divide and conquer dynamic they created of left and right, is wholly controlled by the left, and the right is like hanging on for their dear life, fighting for a little bit of power to try and come back. And that's why Donald Trump was so important to the right, because they saw a win when Donald Trump became elected. They were like, okay, at least we have some representation and it's in the highest office of power. So they all rallied behind Donald Trump because they're just tired of what the left has done. And if you look at the history of America, the left has just, for example, the history of the left includes the KKK, right? The history of the left includes racism. The history of the left includes eugenics by way of Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, where they're destroying Black lives in the womb before they're even birthed, and this is all Democrats, right? And you have to understand that when we talk about poor Black cities in America, the majority of them are controlled by the left and the Democrats. In fact, Jeff Charles had an interview with a guy, and a guy he's a right leaning Republican. He's a very ignorant person, and he asked Jeff. He says, "How come the Black community doesn't vote for Republicans?" And Jeff was like, "A lot of the times, there is no Republican option. There's no Republican there to vote for." And we have to understand that in America, the first senators in U.S. Congress were Black Republicans. So the Republican Party was initially for and with Black people. So all this history has been hidden, misconstrued, and the left, while they pose as a friend and point at the right as being evil and bad and racist, they themselves are to blame for a lot of the problems in the Black community.
It's funny. The message I got here in Mozambique and online basically is that left is pro culture, pro rights, pro freedom, and right is pro economics. So guys who are rich people, the big banking system guys, the corporations. So that's the impression we have here. So
No,
it's actually
no.
yeah.
No, I mean, some of that was true. But
Mhm.
the left owns the banking system, clear as day. The banking system is Wall Street, and Wall Street is in New York. And if you know anything about U.S. politics, New York has been a blue Democratic state for a very long time now. All right. So that aspect is not true. The right does believe in economics. The left is more socialist in their leanings. Um, but the left is very socialist, and socialism, I would say, is inherently racist when you allow white people to use it to govern Black people. Now, if Black people want to practice socialism within themselves in small areas, there's nothing wrong with that. That could be a good thing. But when the government wants to become socialist you're basically having centralization of power, and that becomes a bad thing. We don't want people who have been doing evil